Hi, Microbehunter here again, and in this video I wanted to show you how to make microscope filters, and specifically those that you can put into the filter holder of the microscope. For example, this here is a so-called Darkfield patch stop or Darkfield filter, but in this video I'm also going to show you how to make different ones. And what they do is the following, is they are able to optically stain the specimen. What this means is it changes the color of the specimen in relation to its background. So in that sense it's quite different than simply placing, for example, a blue filter over over the light source. Then everything's going to be blue. But in this case I wanted to talk about so-called Rheinberg illumination, which changes the color of the specimens around and also the color of the background. I will talk a little bit about oblique illumination, where the light comes from the side, and this one is a Rheinberg filter, for example, and then of course also Darkfield. And I will show you different methods on how I've made these filters as a suggestion, but the video is a little bit long, so I'm going to divide it into three parts. In the first part I wanted to talk about a little bit about the theory, to explain you how they work very briefly. The main part will be an introduction, possible ways on how you can make these filters, and last, towards the end of the film, the last third, I'm going to show you some examples how algae, in this case Spirogyra algae, how they look like using the different filters. So let's get started. And it works like this. The central part here is the patch stop itself, and it blocks light, and the outer part here, that is called the annulus, which allows, of course, light to go through. And what happens now is when you put a Darkfield filter into the filter holder, then the specimen will be illuminated from the side, and the background is black. And this is because this patch stop here blocks out the main light of the microscope, and all you're able to see is the parts that light up. That's the indirect light which comes from the side. So this side here actually bounces off the specimen, and then it goes into the objective. So you can actually imagine it's a little bit like this. If you are in a dark room and there is a little bit of sunlight shining through a small hole in the window, because maybe you've got the curtains closed, and then you see the dust. Then you can see the dust is bright on a dark background, or sometimes in the forest you can actually see that. That the fog and the dust and the pollen in the air is bright on dark background when you have the sun rays going through the trees. And it's a little bit here as well. It is like this, that the main light of the microscope, which is very intense, is blocked out, and then the indirect light from the annulus is bounced off the specimen, as I just mentioned. And now the size of this patch stop in the center depends on the numerical aperture of the objective, and the higher the numerical aperture, the more the objective magnifies, the larger it should be. But this one over here is a general purpose size, which works all the way quite well up to using the 4 times, the 10 times, and also the 20 times objective that I have. It's already on the limit a little bit with a 40 times objective. And if you look at Rheinberg filters like these here, that's basically similar, but in this case the central patch stop is not completely black, but also has a color. And so this allows you to set the background color by changing the color of the central patch stop, and the specimen will then get the color of the annulus. So in that sense, Rheinberg illumination and Darkfield are quite related. So, and I'm going to now show you the light path that the light takes by placing a patch stop into the filter holder. And what you can do is you can actually place a piece of paper now into the light path, and this actually then will show you that their central part is actually black, and then there is light on the side striking the object. So you can see that the main light is blocked out by the patch stop. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you first the condensers that you need in order to do Darkfield and in order to do Rheinberg illumination. So I've got 2 condensers here. They kind of look the same, but actually they're from the same, they belong to the same standard. Just want to show you the similarities here. This here is controls the iris diaphragm of the condenser, of course,
And beneath here I have a little push-on filter holder. And it looks like this, and there is a built-in blue filter, and the point of this blue filter is simply to give the lamp, which in many cases is halogen, is to give a more natural looking and a more a less of a reddish tint, so a more daylight type of light color. Okay, this one is simply going to stay in there all the time. With LED microscopes, this one is probably not necessary because LEDs have a stronger blue component anyway. But this is going to be the place where I can put in the different filters, okay? And this condenser over here also has a push-on filter holder. I've got to be a little more careful because this filter can be taken out, okay? I also leave it in there all the time. And if I want to add additional filters or patch stops, I can easily do this by simply dropping it in here, okay? So this one works, of course, and the same thing over here, okay? So that is simply the idea. Some microscopes, they do not have a push-on filter holder, but they have a swing-out filter holder, okay? So there is a little hinge there, and then you can swing it out and you can add a filter. Just make sure that sometimes if you don't get a picture, it's like this, that the filter is not quite centered and it's kind of just on the edge, and then sometimes you don't get a picture because of that, and then you have a problem finding the reason. In many cases it's because the filter is not properly centered. It's kind of right on the edge here, right? Okay, over here, this here is of course the iris diaphragm for the condenser. Yeah, and for using Darkfield and so on, you always have to keep it open because we need light coming in from the side, okay? So what I'll be doing now is I'm simply going to remove these parts here. I'm just gonna use this filter holder over here. I'm going to first start talking about this commercial Darkfield patch stop, which I got from the company Olympus. It is simply a piece of metal which they colored black. The black color is important, okay? The reason is because in my case I have got a highly intense halogen light, and if it is not black, if it is shiny, it's still going to block the light, but it's going to reflect the light back into the lamp like a mirror. And this might cause, or not might cause, it will cause the overheating of the lamp. So that's not a good idea. Less of a problem for LEDs because LEDs do not create so much heat, and the infrared component is less. But still, I would, when designing those, I would actually make sure that you also color it black, because also LEDs can overheat. Okay, so this is basically the commercial one, and the idea is the following. What about the central size here? The size here that you need here needs to be larger the higher the numerical aperture of your objective. So in other words, the more the objective magnifies, also then you have a higher numerical aperture, the more the objective magnifies, the larger the central patch stop must be. If it is too large, then it's going to be too dark. If it is too small, then it's going to be like this, that the background is not going to be completely dark. Okay, this one here works well for magnifications, for objective magnifications all the way up to 20 times in my microscope. 40 times also theoretically works, but it's getting already very blurry and it's not so good. Okay, so this actually is pretty much a general purpose one. I would recommend that you make those and you simply experiment and you simply change the diameter of the central patch stop. Okay, maybe there's a formula, but honestly I think it's probably easiest simply by trying it out by experimentation. So how are you going to make this? Okay, obviously you're probably not going to be able to cut metal that easily. You might try it using a tin can or so, and then you can use a sharp knife, but I want to also show you alternative possibilities, what I've done. This one here, for example, this one I cut out from the cover of a CD. It's a CD cover, CD plastic cover, and I used the felt tip pen to simply color in the central part. Now you might see a little bit that it's not completely black, but there are some spots here, some white spots. It's got to be completely black, okay? Otherwise the background is not going to be dark enough. As a matter of fact, even applying several layers of felt tip of paint did not really work enough, okay? So I would say probably you actually block it out completely using some black cardboard or something, okay? So that's possibility number one. You cut out one yourself using a piece of plastic, okay? And then it goes in like this. Okay, very easy to make, and you can change the central patch stop around. So before I had that idea, I thought a little bit more complicated. I thought that this has to be made of glass, and maybe it's not a bad idea, especially if the lamp creates a lot of heat. No, you don't want this to melt, okay? The heat is intense. Please be careful, okay? So I used glass. And here in this case, I now glued yeah, this is a tin can, okay, from a tin can. I glued it on here and I tried to color it black as well. Again, remember the thing, what I said about reflection. So this, you can use double-sided tape here, and I changed the yeah, the diameter here around like this. This is basically, I got this made in a glass shop. Okay, I told them, please make me some glass discs, and they also polished the edges so that you don't hurt yourself. That's actually quite nice, but probably not necessary. Okay, there are easier ways than actually doing it out of glass. Just want to show you what's possible, what I've experimented around with. So maybe the easiest way, you simply use an overhead foil, but overhead foil which you can use to actually make photocopies, because these are heat resistant. Okay, you don't want the stuff to melt in your filter holder. And what I've done here is I have now also used a felt tip pen. It's an overhead foil marker, and because it's not dark enough, I used several of these, and I yeah, simply stacked them together. Why did I use blue? The reason is because I did not want it to have a black background, but I wanted to have a dark blue background, because for water samples this kind of looks nice if the organisms are bright on a dark blue background, because this kind of looks a little bit more like water. Okay, so this is the reason why I did it like this. Also works, yeah, but maybe not as nice looking maybe as the other filters, but actually who cares if it's nice looking or not, as long as it works. So what I've done else I've done is I've also tried to use now a nail polish. So what I've done is I've actually applied nail polish here in the center, and I did this by first cutting out a mask and then applying several layers of nail polish. Not only several layers, it's yeah, I dropped in a lot of nail polish and let it dry for 2 days. And then it worked, and worked quite well. I removed the mask, which was a sticky tape, and this actually works quite well. I think, yeah, it's quite okay. This is also on glass, but I guess you can also use other filters. So I'm going to show you now 2 possibilities of things that did not work. Here I used a colored foil, and I glued it on here with double-sided tape. And it did not work for the following reasons. When you make Rheinberg filters like these, then you have to make sure that the central patch stop is darker than the edge, than the annulus. Okay, otherwise you will not get an effect. The central light is so intense that it's going to cover the effect of the blue here. So make sure that the central part is very dark. So for example, this one here. It's almost intransparent, okay, but that would work. Okay, it's got to be really dark, the central part, and definitely darker than the edges, otherwise it's not going to work. So this one is a failed example, and this one here also is slightly a failed example, because I wanted to have a yellow specimens on a black background. Also didn't quite work, because also the central part here is not dark enough. So there was still too much light leakage going on, and also the yellow color is not very suitable, because the lamp itself is yellowish anyway. Yeah, so the effect was not very strong here. Okay, so that is basically 2 examples that did not work very well. And another possibility is to print the filters out on overhead foil. In this case, I laser printed them to make sure that the foil is heat resistant. And you can see I got a little bit carried away here, and I tried all combinations. And there are several hundred filters that are made this way, until I found the combinations that I liked most. And here I just wanted to show you alternatives now. These filters here are made of cardboard, okay, using a sharp knife I cut them out, and these are for so-called oblique illumination. And basically it is like this. I used my patch stop here as a model, and you can actually see that if you overlap it like this, that the central part is blocked out, but now you only have light coming from one side, and this actually sometimes gives a slight 3-dimensional effect. So it casts a shadow, and this gives it a slightly 3-dimensional effect. This is an imitation of differential interference contrast, DIC. Basically, it's something maybe that you would call a poor man's DIC, because it gives a DIC similar effect. So certainly something worth trying out. With some specimens it really works well, with others not at all. Okay, so it is not DIC. That's really important to say. It's oblique illumination, but it's you get sometimes a similar effect. This one here as well. What is the main difference? The main difference is that now the central part is not completely black, because I allow some light to go through. This one here only has light from the side, and this one also has light, a little bit of light going through the central part. So the effect is not quite as strong as this one over here. So you can experiment around it. There are endless possibilities. My advice would be first to check whether your microscope is even able to accept filters like this, because many modern microscopes, what they have is they only have a single LED in the center, and then I don't quite know whether this is going to work, because what you need is you need to have light coming also from the side. Okay, so you need to have a certain light cone which is relatively wide, so that you can block out the central part, and then the condenser will actually focus the light to a point. Now I don't know whether this is actually going to work very well with a light source that is already a point, okay, like a single LED. That is something that you have to try out. But first check whether you have a condenser and whether you have a filter holder. If not, you just try anyway to experiment around with this. Alternatively, another thing that I might suggest is if this does not work, is that you use epi illumination, and this means that you simply have a light source, a small lamp, small LED shining in from the top. Okay, well, here are simply a couple of photographs. That's a radiolarian, this one here as well. Here these are synthetic fibers, blue background, and I do not remember what this is. Could be animal fur, it has been such a long time ago. I'm now going to show you how algae look like using the different filters and patch stops. So we're now first going to have a look on the regular bright field. So this is just the conventional bright field image without any filters in place, and you can see that there are some air bubbles. They're going to be important later as well, and those air bubbles will actually show you later a little bit more the characteristics of the filter. This one here is now the one that I used with the blue nail polish, and you can see that the spiral shaped chloroplast of the algae now start to appear yellow on blue background. I think it looks quite nice. Sometimes this looks actually a little bit better than complete dark field, because dark field actually gives you a very high contrast. Sometimes this can be a little bit too extreme. In any case, the blue background also gives a little bit an appearance of water. That's why I like this color a lot. Now let's switch over to conventional dark field. That's the one that many of you already know anyway. Please notice the air bubble on the lower left corner. You can actually see how it looks like. And now I switched over to oblique illumination. That's extreme oblique illumination. You can also see it in the air bubble that the light only comes from one side. And it's quite, a little bit like dark field, but not quite as bright. The effect of a three-dimensional appearance is not very high. But now I'm switching over to my second oblique illumination filter, and this one gives you a very nice three-dimensional image, almost like DIC, almost like differential interference contrast. And you can see that the chloroplasts basically they look a little bit as if they are standing out a little bit, because the shadows that are cast are not as extreme as those that were used in the first patch stop with the extreme one. But this one also allows some of the main light to actually go through the cells, and this kind of gives a more realistic image, but still you see a little bit that there is a shadow on one side, which gives it a slight three-dimensional impression. I think it's quite a nice thing to try out. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to try to change a little bit the size of the cutout, because I'm quite sure that this also has a significant impact on the appearance of the specimen. So in any case, what I'm going to do next is just for comparison, still oblique illumination
information, but I'm going to switch over and I'm going to show you the same image now without any filter, and you're going to see that it's going to look a little bit flatter. So you'll see when it changes over, which is now, and this is now again a regular bright field. And while we still see the details, now the shadows are gone, and therefore the image looks a little bit flatter. Yeah, I mean, basically there are plenty of things that can be experimented with. But last but not least, let's also have a look how it looks in Darkfield. So that's again Darkfield. And what you can see, of course, is that this again gives a very different characteristic. And I think what you have to do is you simply have to match the filter that you use with the specimen for the best results. Well, that is basically all I wanted to show you for right now. These are just some ideas, okay, that I just want to give you so that you can have some basis for experimentation. I think that is also one of the fun things about the hobby, that you can experiment a lot, and that's basically one of the things that I simply would encourage you to do. Try it out. Honestly, try it out and write in your comments how successful you were. I wish you all the best. Happy microbe hunting as always, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.